Welcome, everybody, to the Nightly News Podcast. This is Professor Paul Miller, and I must say, this could be one of the most talent-laden episodes in the history and the 114-episode Nightly News Podcast history here at Central Penn College. We are so fortunate today to be joined by two people who, if you've listened to the podcast, you might be very familiar with. Two people who have had an unbelievable impact on the Harrisburg area media market, and two of the people who have participated in our Nightly News speaker series. First, we're going to welcome Chief Meteorologist from CBS 21, Tom Russell. Tom, it's always a pleasure to have the opportunity to chat with you.
It's great to be here and getting to know you guys over the last couple of months and being part of your speaker series. It's so much fun. There's a lot of vibrant energy here at the college. It's very cool.
And we will chat about that in just a little bit. Also being joined by on-air personality at the River 97.3, and I'm sure if you've ever gone to a Senators or a Bears game, you're familiar with his voice, Mr. Bob Hauer. Bob, welcome.
I'm just really excited now. You said the talent-laden broadcast. I'm like, okay, when are they getting here? I'm very, guys, I love this, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Well, we're just enthralled that you're here. I had to bust out my thesaurus there. And of course, we're being joined by, I'm going to continue calling you Nightly News President Brian Christiana. You're now sort of, and Professor Olympi called you this President Emeritus.
I like the Emeritus for him.
Do you know what that means?
I actually do not know.
So if you've been a president or in charge at a place for a while and you move on, not because you were let go or you know, they call you Emeritus. So like Todd Milano is President Emeritus because he was here for 20 plus years and he obviously retired. So in that way, he still represents the college with that title. So I think that's interesting, something to call you while you're here in your last term. So while we're doing this, obviously, fortunately for the gentlemen that they were able to carve time out of their unbelievably busy schedules, and we appreciate that very much. But why we're here is Brian has sort of gotten to the end of the yellow brick road and has reached Oz at this point. He's in his last term. By the time you're hearing this, maybe a month left before he completes his bachelor's degree here at Central Penn College. And Brian, we'll certainly talk about what the future holds for you. But we wanted to do something a little extra special this time for Brian to send him off into the world with a final podcast. Brian, if you had to guess, how many podcasts have you been on at this point?
I would say 15. I mean, that's not including fantasy football. So with fantasy football, I would probably say 20.
And interestingly enough, so we talked about this previously. So I produce and host this podcast. We also do, Brian and I and a couple of the other students from the Nightly News started and just completed our third season of our fantasy football podcast, which has been very, very successful. So, and we hope that Brian will come back for season 4.
Of course, yeah, of course.
But we, Brian has. I want to be careful how I say this because I don't want to offend any former members or people involved with the Nightly News. But obviously, you have had such an amazing impact. You've been involved since pretty much day one here on campus. Became the youngest president in Nightly News Media Club history, and then the longest tenured president, as you were president for 2 years. And have done so much to advance the club, including the Nightly News Speaker Series, of which I can take absolutely no credit. The only thing that I do is pick up the food.
Yeah.
That's literally...
It's a really important role, though. Let's be very honest here.
And I have to tell you, that is something that, beyond that, I have nothing to do with, and Brian was instrumental in this, and it's hopefully something that I can continue going forward. Maybe I can tap into some of your contacts.
Oh, of course. We're all here to help you out with that.
And hopefully that's something that we can continue after you go. So I just want to kind of ask the first question, kind of get this started, and then Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you, and hopefully you can kind of lead some of the discussion about some of the other topics that we had. So I want to talk about the Nightly News Speaker Series. We've had the fine opportunity to have some amazing people on campus. Obviously, Tom Russell. Obviously, Bob Hauer. We've also been joined by R.J. Harris. And we've also been joined by Glenn Hamilton. Mm-hmm. Am I forgetting anyone?
No, you were right on.
Okay,
yeah.
So those are the 4 that we've done, and we do them twice a year. So we'll be looking to do something in spring, probably, if any of you out there are interested in being a part of the speaker series. But we did this because it was important for our club. We're one of the bigger clubs on campus. We've won Club of the Year. Myself and Professor Olympia have won Advisor of the Year in the past 2 years, and it's something that's very important to us to welcome people in to see what it is that we're doing, and not only that, provide them an opportunity to meet some amazing people to give some great career advice. You all went about it in a different way. RJ went about his in a very unique way. Bob was, they were all unique in their own way, but I have to tell you, the two with you, I left moved. When both of you were talking about how difficult it was for you to scrape your way to where you currently stand, it was just unbelievably inspiring. And I think that was the message that, I don't know if you were intending to give, but to me that I took away with. So I want to first ask you, Tom, I want to go to you. What was it about the opportunity that you jumped at and said, you know what, I don't have to do this, but this is something I want to do?
Well, just being here on this podcast reminds me of, the first time I stepped foot on my campus and, walked in that station, the college radio station. I'm like, I'm hooked. This is what I want to do. And I think it was like just grabbing every opportunity that I could. Oh, I'll do that. And it was unique coming back as a speaker and trying to recall those times where I had opportunity and I seized those opportunities. And then to look around the room at who was at that speaker series, there was, folks who have gone back for their degree, maybe a little older. There were young folks. Brian was there, and Brian reminds me a lot of me, where it's just like, I'll do that. Just taking advantage of all these different opportunities. So as I look back, I don't think of it as scraping my way. I'm like, wow, I get to do that.
Yeah.
I get to do that. And I think it's important as we look at the early part of our career that it's opportunities and then seizing them as they arise.
One of the most interesting things, Tom, that I took away from yours was how many places you've been. I mean, you were not originally from this area. I believe you said you were from the Wilkes-Barre area.
Baltimore area.
Okay, Baltimore. Yeah. By the way, I don't know if I asked you, have you ever been to Jimmy's Famous Seafood?
No.
The next time you go home or the next time you go down to Baltimore, you'll have to make sure.
I will.
Best restaurant in the United States, in my opinion.
U.S.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we're on our way. I'll see you there.
Listen,
crab cakes on the house. All right.
So I'm a big fan of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. So they were featured on there, and that's how we found out about them. But my wife and I go down to Baltimore occasionally to get away for the weekend, and
Jimmy's.
always 100% of the time Jimmy's. And I usually like to try different stuff.
Right.
I don't like to get wrapped up into the same thing.
You go to the same thing. Yeah.
You got to go to Jimmy's Famous Seafood, and they are not paying us for a plug on this podcast. But I found it very interesting.
We will accept food for the record.
No question about that. I did think it was interesting, though, that you shared all of the different places you were. Not only you were in the southeast of the United States, you were in the Midwest, you were out west, you were on the West Coast. I mean, you literally picked up and had to move all of those times. How did that affect your life in a general sense?
As a young man, I really enjoyed it. But literally in this business, you had to move around to move up. So to me, I really, I went everywhere from the Caribbean to San Diego to Florida, and each of those times was a building block for me, and not always good. I mean, we had some bad experiences. We used to say in this business, you're not truly a broadcaster until you've been fired once or twice, and that's part of our business. So for me, early on, it was exciting, but as I grew and as I got a family and a wife, and you have different goals. So then your goal becomes, okay, where's the best place where I can raise a family and still do what I love? So I think your goals change, but to me, it was very exciting. It was an exciting part of moving up in markets, changing markets, and to me, it was all those experiences that makes me relate to folks, because a lot of us are transient and we're around, hey, have you ever been to this area? Like you were just talking about Baltimore, for example. And I think that makes us better broadcasters as we kind of encapsulate all those experiences we have and then find a way to share them.
So back to the speaker series, what were you able to take away from that? I mean, obviously you were here, and it's easy, it was more laid back, more casual than maybe you anticipated, and I don't want to speak for you, but when you left that day, what did you feel? What were some thoughts that you had about the experience?
I was so encouraged because, somebody cared about what I had to say. As broadcasters, we try to get good at our craft, but we never know if anybody's really listening. But I love, and I know Bob's probably going to touch on this too, there's one thing to sit behind a mic or be on TV, but man, when you can talk to people one-on-one and see their reaction and you're sharing your story and it has an impact on them, man, I was blown away. I was so uplifted that day because there were professors in the room. There were folks who were going back for their degree. Not everybody was communication. There was a marketing person. To me, it was, wow, my life experiences relate to a lot of different folks. And that was really uplifting to me. So I thank you guys for inviting me to be part of the series.
Of course, our pleasure that we had that opportunity to learn from you. I will say, just as a finishing touch here, the visual aid that you provided was very interesting. So for those of you, I didn't put it along with the initial story, but I'm going to put it along with this since it's later on. There was a clip, and I don't want to do it injustice, of you live on the scene in the Susquehanna River.
Right.
It was, I would imagine, January or February, freezing cold outside. The ice had collected, and you were on the scene, and behind you, literally your shot behind you is nothing but this ice coming right at you, and part of it you were off air, part of it you were on air, and you were literally, and this is something that you've been doing for a long time, had never seen something quite like this, and you were so amazed by the whole situation. It was so cool.
It was such a genuine reaction where something is happening, and I think as broadcasters we live for those moments. I think I called it lightning in a bottle. And sometimes you just think it's going to be another boring live shot or whatever. And that time the ice on the Susquehanna literally started to move. And to me, it was like being in an earthquake. And if you see the video that Paul might share, it's literally coming at us while we're on TV. Yeah. And that's good TV. I ended up with my voice going like this because I'm like, I'm like a little schoolgirl at this. And I think that's a genuine reaction that people can relate to.
Well, and thank you for sharing. Bob, I want to come to you, too, because, again, everybody went about it in a different way, and the way that you went about it was really interesting, too. Obviously, you talked about your past, and you talked about people who have been inspiring to you, but you kind of left with a really interesting message about, people that might pursue communications. What were when you were trying to prepare for that, how did you even go about preparing for something like that?
I put myself back in that same seat in front of me because I was a sponge. Back when I was in high school, college, even younger, I was a sponge. Like, I never had anyone tell me how to do this. And even to this day, I don't know that anybody's ever really told me, well, check these boxes, buddy, and you're good to go. So there was something really genuine about, I just watched people and tried to figure out how they do what they do, why they do it. And I wanted to try to push that why really into the system of where they want to be. Because, man, if you are passionate in your why, and I'm sitting alongside one of the guys that has a huge why, you can tell he just loves what he does. This is not just something he spends time doing for 40 hours a week or whatever it is. It helps really vet out a lot of the people that are going to be a person who says, I just love this. And every day is an appreciation of the opportunity you get. So that's where I really went back to is, okay, well, how can I demonstrate the power of the word why? Because that was really, really central to it. And then try to say, yeah, there's a lot of ways you can figure this whole thing out. You can follow my path or your own, but you have to be the one who's this like assessment machine that's surveying the land to figure out, what do I do next, and take the risk and go forward, and it'll pay off. Karma works in your favor more often than not.
I want to get to Brian here, but I just want to close with one thought and to your point, and it's that the number one thing that I can possibly share with people is enthusiasm and the ability to show up. And I say this in class, and people look at me funny, like, what do you mean, showing up's half the battle? Literally, that's one of the things that I try to push my students. Like, listen, you're going to be able to learn from people who you get to work with. Even if you're new at a new company, you're going to be able to work with people who are smarter than you and are going to help you learn and get to where you want to be. But they can only do that if you're there. They can only do that if you're there on time. And I promise you, I don't care what industry you're in, if you show up with enthusiasm, on time, every day, you're going to be successful at your job, and it's that simple. And I wish more people would kind of buy into that attitude, especially with as cutthroat as the broadcast industry is in today's day and age. I got to tell you, I'm sure we can all think of people who we work with that maybe don't subscribe to that particular attitude, and I think that in the end, the people who are successful are the ones that are showing up with positive attitude every single day.
I want to cap on that too, because it is showing up, it is positivity, but it's also playing well with others. one of the reasons why, here with the radio stations, so Tom gets to bounce back and forth from TV and radio. One of the reasons why we love when Tom comes in is not just because he's really good at what he does. It's because we genuinely like him. We work in a better environment when we're around our friends, and that's what we're surrounded with. So I'm not saying you have to be everybody's best friend, but I'm telling you that there's something comfortable about Tom comes in and oh my God, Tom's here. Oh, what a great day. And everybody's mood is happier and lighter, and we do better work.
And that comes across in radio in ways that even TV can't capture. When you're comfortable with somebody, it shows. And when you're uncomfortable, that stands out. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to take, Paul, your point one more step, because not only being, there, showing up, but I think we have a new generation that is there and not present, whether it's their phone or whatever. If you're going to be there, be present. And, I struggle with my own kids, looking at the phone and it's like, wait a minute, there's people in the room, look them in the eye, tell them you're here, tell them you're excited. And it really goes back to the word that it's so simple, enthusiasm, Be glad you're there.
And that's the one thing I can tell you from a lot of the feedback that I get from my students, because we ask for a survey at the end of the course. Now, obviously, people like Brian have had me for class for 6-7 different times.
Yes.
But students that I have that have only met me for the first time, honestly, that's probably the number one word that I get from my student observation surveys is enthusiasm, and that people just appreciate the amount of enthusiasm I bring to it. All right, Brian, I'm going to turn this over to you. We chatted about the speaker series, and first of all, just to close, thank you, both of you, for taking the time to do that. It really, really meant a lot to us as a club, and it really meant a lot to your fans who got to meet you. But Brian, I know that you have a lot that you want to chat about, so I'm going to go to you.
Well, yeah, first of all, again, thank you, Professor Miller, for allowing us to be here today. We're very appreciative. Thank you again, Bob. My guy from day one.
Always got your back.
Yep.
You know what? I'll tell you what, this is really interesting, and I want to touch on it because why Brian? I think that there's a lot to this. So even Brian and I go back to even his father. His father was instrumental in my life as a kid. His father was somebody that sang. And I was a young kid who sang, and it was very rare for a boy that would do this stuff. I looked up to him because he was really confident in doing that. So, man, it'd be great. So the years went on. I've always looked up to his dad. I came back to do the high school commencement address, and Brian was in that graduating class. And I watch his kid running for the student council president, who does this campaign that's a little more than just, I want to be president, thanks very much. And I could see there's this spark in this kid. So when your dad reached out to me, the first thing I said is, to his dad, is also Brian, is look, Pudge, I looked up to you my entire life, and I still do. The fact that I have the opportunity to maybe open a door to show what this kid really can do, I can't wait to see it, because there were just these inklings of it. So as we kind of go through how we talk about this, I almost look at some of the stuff we're going to talk about as all right, how do we get Brian the job? How do we set Brian up for the career overall?
Yep.
And I'm so excited about this, because this is finally an opportunity for me to pay forward what his dad did for me. And again, and Brian hears me say this a lot, the one agreement we have is everything I do, he has to do for someone else someday.
Yep.
So I'm so enamored by the fact that we get to talk about this and hear where Brian goes next, because we're so on your team.
And I got to tell you, and Brian's heard the story before, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for one of my professors in college. And I'm very open with this. I struggled. I almost failed out my freshman year, as many do. I struggled that transition. I had a professor my second semester my freshman year who really took me under his wing and really paved the way for me to even be here, because I believe that if there wasn't for this one chance class that I went to that I don't want to go into because I don't want to take away some of our time, I don't believe I would be here. If I would have skipped class that day, I don't believe that I would be here at all. And I'm so glad that I have the opportunity to do that.
No, we're very appreciative for you here at the school. You know that.
Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate
Tom,
that. You don't have to kiss up to me. You don't have me for class anymore.
You're good. Tom, thank you again for being here. We're always so appreciative.
My pleasure.
I just love it when I'm in the cafeteria and then I look at the evening news and then there's you on TV and everyone's like, do you know that guy? I was like, of course I know Tom Russell. He's the man.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
But going back on, I just wanted to talk about, comment on the speaker series. It was actually funny how I found and got Tom Russell. We're at the Bob 94.9 birthday bash. I don't know if you remember this. Mm-hmm. We're in the hallway at Club at Cell, and I said, hey, Tom. I said, I might need you in a couple of months. He's like, all right, what will you need? I said, we have a speaker series. I said, Bob has spoke at it. Glenn, I know, Tom's good friends with Glenn Hamilton. And then, of course, RJ Harris. And he's like, oh, that'd be so exciting. Come in. And I was like, yeah, you could just talk about the industry, your career, education, whatever. And he was just so excited and his face glowed. Yeah.
And then I didn't hear from you for months.
The time wasn't right yet. We planted the seed and let
it
cultivate.
You let it cultivate a little bit.
Yes. And then with Bob, I mean, that was pretty easy. Just like, yo, do you want to come in? And he's like, yeah, just find a time and day.
But in all actuality, the only difference between Tom and I in this situation is you didn't know Tom as well
I
yet.
know, yeah.
But because the reaction was genuinely the same. Like, hey, Tom's another guy that, and I always equate it to a radio background, where Tom, despite the TV part of it now, I just don't wear makeup, and he can only go back any time. But
maybe you should.
Yeah, definitely. But I think that's always been this difference maker is if there's one person in this market, and we were lucky there are a couple more that emulates that energy and the willingness to help. I don't know, and I would love to find out someday. We talk about it another time. The things you've said no to. I think I always say everywhere good in my life happened after I said yes. So I knew that if you even approached him, of course he's going to do it.
Of course.
Yeah, and Bob and I had this whole thing. We used to say, I always thought I was busy until I saw what Bob's schedule was. So hats off to Bob for sure. But as I get older in my career, there's nothing more satisfying than to see somebody like you, Brian, coming up and doing well and taking advantage of these opportunities that come along. I find that so rewarding. I've had some interns over the years, and now they're at different TV stations. And, I think younger in my career, everything was so much more competitive. Now it's like, wow, I really want to see that kid succeed and do better than I did.
Tom, if I'm correct, I think I might know one of your former interns.
Okay.
His name's Anthony. Was it Anthony?
Anthony Chivarelli,
yeah.
He's
an Ely'sburg kid.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, he was the one that was on College Game Day.
Yep.
He proposed to his girlfriend on College Game Day at a Penn State game.
He's a lot like Bob. Like, he will find a way to stand out from the crowd, and if there is an opportunity, he'll do it. He's a really sharp kid.
Yeah, it was really cool seeing him on ESPN. But talking about, like, when we were talking earlier about higher education, I just wanted to talk about your college careers. I know, Bob, you went to Susquehanna, and one of the cool stories you always told me was when you would travel back and forth. Right. You were traveling.
So I was originally going to Allentown College. Now it's a Sales University. It really actually goes back to the internship piece. So again, I'm growing up in Shamokin. I'm one of the very few people that has all my real teeth coming out of there.
Oh,
and
wow!
You do too. You do too. All right, but I mean, what am I going to do? How am I going to get this experience? I was a kid going to college at a small college with a new TV film department because I wanted to be on ESPN, but I didn't have a campus TV station. I didn't have anything. I called a radio station during my winter break and said, "Hey, look, I'll erase tapes, I'll scrub toilets. Do you have an opportunity for me?" And near the end of the break, I got a call saying, we actually have a weekend position open if you want it. And it was just that opportunity. Talk about being present. That's really what it was. It was, we have an opportunity. And like, okay, I just called and left you a message and you want to put me on the radio? Okay. Yeah, I did some radio at campus on a small little AM station, but sure. So I said yes and started doing these shifts and driving back afterwards the next day. And it wasn't long before a night position opened. And it's like, okay, I'm going to say yes. Next 5 weeks, driving back and forth from Allentown to Sunbury and every single day, full-time student, until I made that transfer to go to Susquehanna and close it out. But while that story didn't necessarily end positive for me in that I graduated and there was no true full-time job despite the hours I put in, my willingness to say yes and take that jump, I was like, oh, man. Everybody thought I was nuts. Everybody thought, well, wait a minute, you're not staying on campus with us on the weekend and out Thirsty Thursday and drink. No, I got stuff to do. And because I want to get to the finish line faster. But by saying yes and doing that driving back and forth, it was always something that I knew very few other people were willing to do. And I thought, man, I'm going to do those. If I do those things, I'm always going to separate myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And Tom, you said you were with the radio station. How was that?
Well, when I went in, I just wanted to be on the air. I wanted to do something, and I remember starting out doing a Christian radio show called The Hour of Power. We used to play like Petra and Christian rock, and it was really cool. But when I look back, I grew up in Baltimore, and in a market that size, you didn't have the opportunity as a high school kid to work your way into a radio station. So when I was looking at college, I wanted to go to a medium-sized market. I ended up in Dayton, Ohio, and my goal was to max out everything I could at the campus radio station. But after a year in, you start meeting people, and they're like, "Hey, you could be doing, an overnight shift at a radio station." So just like Bob mentioned, I remember you'd be out to a party till like 11. You're like, "Oh, I'm going to be on the air from midnight to 6 a.m., so I got to go."
Yeah.
And people are like, "Really? You're not going to hang out? You're not going to party with us all night?" I just remember being so focused, like Bob said, that this is what I wanted to do, and then the reward from that, for some reason, just kept me motivated. I'm like, I'm on the radio, and I'm 19 years old. This is really, really cool. So find that passion. The other thing I'll mention is, when I went to Dayton, they didn't have a great comm program. You look at, I think sometimes we get caught up on who has the best studios or who has the best, facilities and this and that. It's really about what you take advantage of, as opposed to, oh, they have super nice microphones or they have a really cool TV studio. Look for, like Bob mentioned, the people and the quality and the stuff that you're really going to take with you, as opposed to the glitz and the glamour. So often in TV and radio, you want these beautiful studios and cool logos and all that kind of stuff. But it's really what you glean from the people you're around that matters.
I think this is the Central Penn advantage overall, too, because look, you talk about Dayton, I'll use, DeSales as a small school, and we're looking right now at Central Penn. There are a lot of people that wanted to get in the broadcasting industry that would say, well, going to Syracuse, going to Northwestern.
Bring up Syracuse, yep.
And again, and I will tell you, the difference always was, and even when I applied and went through that process, because everybody said, well, this is where you got to go. Got to go to USC.
Right.
Well, you might touch a camera by your junior year, maybe.
No opportunity.
Yeah, you're just going to, and I walked in, I used my college experience. I walked in at the second year of that TV program at Allentown, it's the second year of the overall program. I walked in the door as a freshman, and I was hosting a TV talk show that first semester. And I'm just like, oh, okay, we need somebody. Yeah, you're going to be good enough. Okay, here we go. It was just the access point. Don't discount limited assets, and it doesn't have all the nicest stuff.
Yep.
Because let's get to the TV end of the radio end where we are now. Oftentimes, the materials that we're using are also kind of outdated a little bit. Sometimes we don't have the best tech either. We have to make the best of it. But the access, the experience, that is the stuff that I don't care what goes on that piece of paper. Central Penn offers that, because you can come here and jump in immediately. And somebody like Brian is not going to be, sitting on the bench for 2 years. He can be the youngest president in the history of the college.
What's really interesting about that in terms of Brian is we're now, this season, March 1st, will be our third season calling baseball. Brian was a sophomore and was doing play-by-play with me. He's been very involved with the sports, with the athletics. He's done so much, did some of our soccer broadcasts immediately. And here's one even better. There's a gentleman that just joined the club recently, had been up here for 1 month, and he is the producer of our basketball games.
Wow.
1 month, and he's producing, and he's doing an amazing, amazing job. And again, that just speaks to opportunity. But you know what? Guess what? That opportunity was there for everyone else. And trust me, we promote the opportunities as much as we can.
Right.
But that opportunity is there. It's just, to your point, Bob, just say yes. Just be there. Just do it. And we actually can offer paid positions through the athletics department. So Tyrene was here for a month, already had a paid position producing our basketball program.
Wow.
So
that is the difference from being, a volunteer and being a professional. Once you collect $1, you're a pro. Okay,
it makes you feel good.
And I think that's right. Now that's a new piece in 2020 that people can access. We started, there wasn't necessarily that money that was up there to even inspire us. It was about the access and the opportunity and maybe the dream of an awesome tomorrow. But yeah, you're a professional. When you do that, when you collect a check, you are now a professional producer, and they can't take that away from you. And if you're 19 doing that, man, where are you going to be in 20 years? Right. If you started there, that's always what I thought. I thought, man, if I am here at the age of 20 and 21, what am I going to be at 40? because I only see a trajectory that goes and climbs. I don't see it any other way.
Brian is going to leave Central Penn College with 3 years of play-by-play baseball on his resume, in addition to the 1,000 other things that he's doing. But if he wants to go in that direction, he at least already has. Now, look, I'm no Vin Scully by any means, but I have some experience, and I think having the ability to work with him, and not only, Bob, you've worked in sports for a long period of time, to work with you. I mean, it's unbelievable, and I know, Tom, you did sports as well. It's unbelievable to have the opportunity, and I hope that Brian looks back years from now and remembers these days of working with all of us, and hopefully, he continues to, once he becomes big time, he doesn't blow us off.
No, never.
Well, and I think an important fact here is we're in a business that really is a craft, and you get better at a craft by doing it.
That's right.
Yep.
And so many people sit back and say, I can do that, and they don't do it. I can't tell you how many times, and this is one of the more satisfying things to me, people come in to cut a promo, like a business guy or something. They'll stand in front of the camera and they'll be like, "Oh, I can read that," and then they flub like the whole thing, and they can't do it. And secretly, I'm satisfied because it is a craft that I've gotten better at as I've gone. And the people who do this really well, they make it look easy, and it's not.
Tom, I was also going to ask you, because I've been reading about how's your new podcast with all the meteorologists?
Yeah, we actually call it "It's Raining Mets."
Hallelujah! Yeah, it's raining Mets.
It's actually gone really well and very positive feedback, and I think podcasting has really made it's I call it like radio's little brother, because to me there's nothing like live radio, but the podcasting has really caught on because it's the way people access information.
Yeah.
They can listen to it when they want. Maybe they're driving, maybe they're running. But to answer your question, it's gotten a lot of great feedback. I think the challenge with podcasting is staying relevant. Like, we'll record something and then, the storm will come and go, and then, people want to know about the next storm.
Yeah.
So, but it's really been a positive thing, and it's really neat to see how many people access this thing.
Yeah, you're 100%. I listened to a couple minutes of the first one. I was like, this is really cool. Listen to you and Ed Russo and Steve Knight. It was just really cool.
Well, it's important for us because, we have 2.5 minutes to do our weathercast. So we can't get into really nerdy weather stuff that we like. So it gives us a chance to dig in and dive in a little bit deeper. And I'm surprised how many fans of that there really are.
Well, people love that deep dive too. The one limitation we have in any type of commercial broadcasting is obviously if we get an hour, there's 42 minutes of content, 18 minutes of commercial, and the commercial component for us to be in broadcast, that's what pays our bills. So those 18 minutes are really important. They really are. But we get into a world where we can dive deep. And only the people who are listening that want to dive deep with us. It drills down to find that really interesting nuance. And podcasting has allowed these nuances to rise because turns out we like stuff and other people like the stuff we like, and they would like to hear our impact. And if we can time shift it and give it to them on their own terms, they're going to be there with us. Podcasting allows that flexibility of I don't have to live my life on your terms, but man, I get to be along with the ride.
I got to tell you, one of the most interesting things that I've experienced in the past 6 months is I'm also, in addition to the 1,000 other things I do, I also oversee all of our interns from our department. So Brian just completed his internship at PCN, and I got to go over and visit him, and it's a wonderful time. But I learned something that day. And Brian, I know you know where I'm going with this. What is the #1 program on PCN?
Weatherworld.
Weatherworld, yeah.
Weatherworld over at PCN.
So I learned that if Weatherworld is not, I believe it's on a 5 o'clock to 5:15, so it's a 15-minute program. If it's not on, they get so many calls and correspondence, and again, that goes to show, to your point, Tom, how interested people are about the nuance of weather, and how interesting that is that that's their #1 program that they show every day.
I'm going to toss another component to that too. Weatherworld's been on for ever, and I think that's really important. Now let's talk about, Tom, you've been here, what, 18 years. So 18 years, and I'm not saying that Tom Russell wouldn't be Tom Russell if he showed up here in year 1, but there is an effect that the longer you can stay in one spot, the stronger you are. And I think a lot about that as I look at other markets and I hear other people and I judge, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but I judge, could I do it? And I'm never really impressed. That's okay. I listen and I find out, well, they've been there 10 years. They've been there 15 years.
Right.
If you have the ability, and Tom bouncing around to get to where he is and where he can happily raise a family in a community he loves and loves him, all you have to do is stay. Musical chairs stop. If you have that luxury when you finally settle in to settle in a nice spot, be consistent.
Yep.
If you provide them consistency, they will be with you year, and they're only going to grow. You keep doing this podcast, for instance, these people are going to tell other people, and they're going to tell other people, and it will only continue to grow. It is only an upward trajectory, and all you have to do is be the same as you've always been.
Right.
The plant Dr. Noel Falk on WHP 580.
That's my
who's-
dude.
Yeah, who's been around for God knows how long you this. He knows, like 40-some years, whatever it is, as long as I've been
37.
born. 37. And I'm 39, I remind
Got
you. But look, and I'll tell you, at some point in the world of plants, you've told every single way to help a plant. And again, you fertilize it, you cut it, you pot it, or you plant it. I mean, there's 4 pieces of advice. He is a staple on Saturday mornings because of his delivery and consistency. If we provide consistency in broadcasting, they'll be with us every single day.
Well, and that's part of what we're doing here. You know, the way that we release our podcasts, every Tuesday morning, 8 o'clock, podcast ready to go. We do 8 episodes per term. We do take like finals week off and break, and then we come right back. And I think that's part of what it is, because people come into work Tuesday morning, they know we're ready to go. If they can't listen to it today, they listen to it tomorrow. And sometimes I post it a little early, and I got people that are subscribers on YouTube. They're already have listened to it before we even are promoting it. So, and to your point, you know, when we first started doing this, it was like the old college radio thing, like who's really listening? And at first it didn't bother me. I wanted it to be an experience for the students. I wanted it to be an experience for the guests, because most of the guests that are on are not professionals like yourselves. In fact, often I have to break people in terms of this is their first podcast, right. This is their first experience. But now the numbers that we get on our podcast are just fantastic. Now we do have a relatively limited audience because this is typically about Central Penn things, and there's only so many students and faculty and staff we have. But I do think that the consistency is the key. Our numbers, and I bring this up in class. I literally, when I'm trying to, we have a podcast class. And I try to help them with how to market it. And I bring up our YouTube views from 15 when we started. And it's like this. And then for those of you that can't see the motion I'm making, like an upward trend. And so I do think consistency is an unbelievably important part of it. Yeah, people get to know you.
And use those right tags, too. So, for instance, when we put the tags up on this, make sure you put Tom Russell shirtless, and it will. It's amazing how that thing will just go up right away.
I think that might scare folks. But,
only a handful.
Yeah.
No, but I thank you. I love being able to talk about that, Brian. I'm sorry that we kind of jumped into a little bit of your time.
I enjoy this.
I think that it's so cool. And when we get together and get to talk shop like this,
it's
man,
fun.
we love it.
It is satisfying.
This is pretty cool. Guys, any advice to students in a comm program? Tom, Bob, whoever. Yeah, just in a communications program.
It goes back to the theme I think that's running through here is when you're present and you're available, opportunity is going to present itself, and you got to jump at it. I've done everything. When I started out on radio and I made the jump to TV, and one of the first things I did was shoot Friday Night Football. I grabbed the camera and didn't know what the heck I was doing, and went out on the sideline and shot football. And that's how a lot of photographers cut their teeth in the video business. And, because you need bodies, you need people to shoot it, and you're there. So in this program, and it was interesting when we were doing the speaker series that, people are at all different walks of life. They have full-time jobs or they're students or whatever. But each of them that I talked to said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to take advantage of this particular opportunity, or I'm going to write for your newsletter. There's so many things out there, and now the saying over at our company is providing content wherever people need it. And there's so much need now for content that there's no excuse to not produce something, whether it's a voice thing or a print thing or a video thing, and we can all do that with our phone. So I would just say it's just try everything, throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks, because I think we're in a whole new landscape where people are going to gravitate, as Bob mentioned, to things they like and and you'll be surprised who likes the things you like.
Here's one of the questions I had, and this is kind of what I try to share with people. What's interesting is, yes, is the media landscape right now difficult? There's no question about it. We all know, in radio and we don't necessarily have time to go into all of that, but television too, corporate consolidation has really changed things over the years. So maybe some of those opportunities that might have been there aren't there. That said, we never would have even imagined that we were calling Central Penn athletics. And when you look at the proliferation of your local market sports stations, your AT&T Sportsnet in Pittsburgh and your, Comcast Sportsnet in Philly, there's more and more attention to these big teams. Even the Harrisburg Senators are on MILB TV. So even if you're a Senators fan, you're not from the area, you can watch that. So while the big corporate markets aren't necessarily as viable of a career path, there's a lot more opportunity on the lower levels. Even a college like University of Texas having their own sports network. Yeah. I mean, you would never even 20 years ago even thought that was going to be.
Look, my kid, I came down one morning as he was getting ready for school, and he's watching the Tennis Network. And again, talk about something that's a nuance that I don't know. And he's like, oh my God, I love watching this Tennis Network.
I'm
like,
a big tennis player.
24 hours a day. I mean, you're right. You can get to drill down to these points where there's specific programming related to these specific touches. So specialize, and that's okay. The key obviously is being open for the opportunity. I'm going to give 2 words that I think are really important when it comes to a communication student looking for tomorrow: attentive and inventive. Pay attention to what's going on around you, because the way it is now isn't the way it's always going to be. You get to be the person who brings us to the next stage. Okay, so you need to pay attention to what's going on in the world so you can really set you off for that. And then the inventive part. Don't think that this is the only way to go. You have to see, like, oh man, what could the next step be? I think it's going to be this. And you don't need to be Alexander Graham Bell, inventing this. You don't need to be Marconi to invent the radio. You don't know. You just need to be the one who says, I think this is the next path. And you know what? Let's jump. And I think that when you're attentive, it opens up the opportunity for you to truly be inventive. This way, the education component we're providing them here at Central Penn, great, we're giving you basics, right? But in the end, dude, you're on your own. And I'm not saying you're on your own as in we're not going to support you. Is what you're going to do next is going to be based upon your sweat equity. So if you're in control of it, why not decide the path you want to go? And then that energy part you guys talked about, wouldn't it be really cool if people all of a sudden say, I love your energy, tell me more. It's that yes, I'll subscribe. Yep. They're subscribing to you. And all of a sudden, you have these people that are all bought into what you're doing. And you're like, I don't know how the hell I got here. I just figured this out. I was like, yeah, I'm just going to be creative, and I'll do it. But that's so cool, is you have your own license to do with what you want to do next. All you have to do is pay attention to what's going on. And man, you're going to sweet spot the next step. It's not going to be a lightning strike. It's going to be in your head the whole time.
And I got to tell you, really all we can do as an educational institution is provide opportunity, and it's really up to the students to take that initiative, to take that opportunity. And, it's funny because in a lot of my classes, I compare opportunities that were given to Brian, and some of the younger students that come in all know Brian, and I said, Brian, and this is no disrespect to you whatsoever, Brian was in your shoes. Brian was exactly where you are, and one day said, you know what? This sounds like something that I'm going to be interested in. I want to do for a career. I'm going to get involved with this. And it was that, just whatever it was, that light switch that went off in your head, and now look, just a couple of years later where you are.
Well, yeah, I was actually going to talk about that. First of all, our program at Central Penn isn't broadcast focused. It's mostly public relations, journalism, media, online digital media. And when we talked about doing the live streaming for baseball, Professor Miller, it was actually like on one of my first days here, we talked about it, and we were like, let's make this work. I mean, it's a great opportunity for other people, get others involved, and then you brought up how it could be possibly a paid position. So myself, you, and our friend Ian, we worked together for a good couple months. It took a long, solid couple months, even close to a year, to get everything worked out. We got a donor through the athletic program, and we got it going, and it's just really cool to see how we built up like a non-broadcasting school to get an identity of some sort of broadcast. So it's Central Penn, great, like we've been saying this past 40 minutes, is a great place for opportunity.
It really is. The other aspect of education that I want to emphasize, and it kind of goes to Bob's attentiveness, be a student of broadcast. I love going back and looking at like old weather guys and how they did it. There's a guy who used to draw all his maps backwards on glass. you saw it the right way, but he would actually draw it back. There's so much fascinating history in broadcasting. What made that personality stand out, or that radio show so successful? Study those things, because we can really learn from them, build on them, and a lot of times what's old is new again.
Yeah, you're connecting with the human condition.
Yeah.
So you see somebody that the weather is, I think, so great, because in reality you are, I'll use the word sell. Your forecast and the other station's forecast, they can be pretty close. You're all looking at the same stuff. You might come to somewhat different conclusions. Yours are always better.
Thank you.
But the piece we come to is the connection. Right. So when you watch people who've been successful at doing this, you're not necessarily wondering, okay, well, maybe their presentation I could steal something with, but why do I care? What makes me, and I'll even use you because I'm such a huge fan of what you do, what makes me like you so much? Not just personally when we're inside here, but watching you. Why do I connect so much with you? And understand that, because then you take that part and you say, how do I project that forward to somebody else?
Right.
Because I see why I like Tom, and another guy we have a lot of respect for, Chuck Rhodes in Harrisburg.
Right.
Chuck Rhodes, guy, man, just the most likable guy.
You wanted to hang out with him.
Yeah, and I think that, man, that's always, we didn't need to be the most intelligent forecaster, the biggest voice radio guy.
Right.
No, we need to be normal people that we'd sit around and have a beer with. And I think that's the stuff that in the student piece, you look back to how broadcasters connected over decades. There was believability, which news-wise you had to trust them every single night. But there was something about them that you connected with, and you thought, man, this is somebody that I really can see myself hanging out with. And that's why we keep hanging out with you at 5, 5:30, 6, and 11 every single week.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I do have to say that we are coming to the end of the episode, but there is just one small thing that I wanted to share, and I hope that maybe both of you will consider on the spot sharing some words of wisdom for Brian. First of all, Brian, it's certainly been my honor to work with you over the years. I certainly hope that once you've graduated from school, we can, remain friends. And,
of course.
And I hope, obviously we've never really hung out because, we're not really supposed to do that type of thing. But certainly once you graduate, that's a different story. I still hang out with Mr. Norm Geary every once in a while. I get to see him. But really what I want to say is this. To be honest with you, there's no way that the Nightly News podcast, the Nightly News in general, would it be anywhere near where we are today. Our sports broadcasts would be nowhere near where they've come and where we are currently without you. And I just hope that you take away a positive experience from everything that you've been able to accomplish here. And I hope that when you think back, you think positive memories of not only just all of the wonderful things that you've done that you can write on a resume, but all of the things that you've done for other people that might not necessarily translate to that resume, and the mentorship that you've given people like Tyler and Christian, and the fresh attitude that you've given. I don't know if you remember this conversation, but I do. There was a day that Brian was running a meeting, and I don't know if he was just having a bad day, but he was a little grouchy, and he was a little not himself. And I said something to him, and I hope that he remembers this, and if he doesn't, I hope he remembers it going forward. And this was very early on. This was not recently. I said to him, Brian, you're the president of this organization, and everyone in this organization is going to look to you for how to act. And by you maybe being late or by you not taking something as seriously, that's basically opening the door for everybody else to act the same way. And that you have to make sure that you always act the way that you want your colleagues or the people, frankly, who are underneath you, how you want them to act too. And ever since then, that never happened again.
No.
And not only that, and I wasn't rude about it. I just made a comment like, hey,
oh, yeah, of course.
You're in a position where people look up to you. If you don't take it seriously or if you show up late, they're going to do the same thing. And I got to tell you, ever since I've never seen that. But Brian, I got to tell you, everything that you've done here look, have you made mistakes? Sure.
Yeah.
But you learn from those mistakes. In fact, I wouldn't want you to have been perfect because you wouldn't have learned half of what you learned. Yeah. And I certainly hope that not only do you take advantage of anything I can do to help you, you've got 2 other people here that are more than happy to help you. So,
well, let me just say you've been an inspiration to watch because it's kind of got re-energized my love of broadcasting when I see you get excited about broadcasting and you looking at Bob and going, man, this guy really helped me. And I want you to know how much of an inspiration you are. And Paul, thanks for sharing that story there because we all need people to call us out.
Yeah.
The people that just go, oh, you're great, you're great, you're great. They're not really helping us. It's people like Professor Paul going, you know what? You need to step up your game. That's going to make you better.
Part of our industry, and Tom and I, we have had a couple of very interesting conversations about as our industry changes, challenges never stop. We've both in the past 2-3 years really had to take good looks at what we're doing now and do we have to do things differently and maybe it's even concerns. And again, how do we figure out the next step? And that is going to be present in your career no matter you do this or anything else. The key is how you meet those challenges. We have to make mistakes and make the mistakes now. You're going to make mistakes later on really, really pivotal moments, and you're going to have to forgive yourself and move on. But you are going to have to always keep in mind that you are not perfect. The people you are talking to are not perfect, and that's okay. And when you're challenged and you're not sure what to do next, people who have climbed further than you have those same challenges and feelings. You are not alone in that. No matter how established you think we are in where we're at, we have had true moments where it's like, I don't know what tomorrow is going to be in this career. And this 20-year career, the gray hair could tell you how many years that is, but how quickly that snap can happen. Yep. And we all could find ourselves there. Come to those challenges and know that you're not the only person who's had to meet them, and continue on. And when you get derailed, get back on and do it again.
Brian, I hope that you do one favor for me. If it's one thing that you do on an annual basis, set your calendar, I don't know, pick a date, and listen to this podcast every year for the rest of your life. I think that would help if you ever get down or if you ever get passed over for a job, which you will, we all have. If you ever feel like this isn't the right industry for you and question yourself if you made the right decision, before you go on, if that ever comes into your mind, I want you to come back and you listen to this podcast. And I have a feeling that might be the inspiration you need to keep it moving.
Yeah, no, I'm very appreciative for all 3 of you here today. I mean, this was such a blast to just have a normal conversation with you all about the media, the industry. Professor Paul, you the man. You always will be. I'm very appreciative for giving me the opportunity that not many people have. I mean, coming to a small campus like this and making it like our own. I think of our biggest accomplishments. Club of the Year by far was the biggest thing we've done.
I agree.
That's something that I would have never imagined taking over. We were 5-6 months into the presidency, and we get Club of the Year. Greatest accomplishment. Tom, I look at you as a role model, man. You're just super cool on the TV. Again, when I see you in the CAF, it's just awesome. Every Saturday morning, you're the first voice I listen to on the computer because when you send me those emails, I mean, it brightens my day.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome. Bob, May 5th, 2016, man. I mean, or May 19th, I'm sorry. May 5th was the prom. I'm sorry.
I was not at the prom with you. No.
But no. May 19th, 2016, all started. It'll go on forever. Thank you for everything. Bringing me in and with the family. Every month, wrestling pay-per-views. Giving me a job. I mean, can't ask for anything more.
Look, I gave you nothing. I gave you nothing that wasn't given to me. And as I hear you talk about Central Penn, I really want to point this out. The Club of the Year and everything, it's only this way because you wanted it to be. So if you have the ability to want something into being, what do you want to do next? Because it's going to happen. So want it, and you'll find a way.
You're right on. I mean, it's just these 3 people, man. You guys have all had such a big impact on my adult life so far, and I'm just so appreciative.
Well, Brian, I think I can speak for all of us that we're appreciative of the efforts that you made, and frankly, you're sitting here with us today because of the type of person you are and because of the goals that you have for yourself. So, gentlemen, first of all, thank you so much, Bob, Tom, for taking time out of your day to be here. This is probably, again, the most high-profile guests that we've had on the podcast.
I'm still waiting for the talent to show up.
But
My pleasure, really.
I just honestly, it certainly means a lot to myself and the institution, but I know it means the world to Brian. So, Bob Hauer, thank you so much for taking time to be here. I've listened to you as long as I can remember being in this area, and certainly, being at Senators games and Bears games to get to hear you in the past. It's something that, even my family knows who you are. So it's pretty amazing. So thank you for spending time here.
Thank you.
And Tom, just to have the opportunity to get to know you over the last few months and to talk with you at the speaker series and to see how many Uber fans that you had. I will never forget, there were a couple people, I'm not going to call them out, but when we said that you were coming, they were like, oh my gosh, we need to be there. We love Tom. We want to meet him. We want to talk to him. But again, the way that you approached the speaker series, I think, was extremely cool and interesting and really showed how the progression that you've been through, but also how difficult it is to get to where you want to be. So, again, I appreciate you taking time out of your day.
My pleasure.
And Brian, I know that we'll have you on again. So I don't ever want to say that this is our last one, but this is definitely the big one. So thank you for not only taking the time to be here, but setting this up. I mean, this is amazing, and I'm really looking forward to getting to do the editing of this podcast.
We'll post our selfie after. I know, Bob, you're like the king of those. So, I mean...
Got practice.
Yep,
I got practice on it.
But again, Brian, thank you so much for all of your hard work,
you.
man, and we're gonna miss you.
I'm just very appreciative again for you having me here today.
Well, of course. All right, well, that's going to do it for another edition of the Nightly News Podcast. For Chief Meteorologist on CBS 21, Tom Russell. For the River 97.3, our on-air personality, Bob Hauer. And for President Emeritus, Brian Christiana of the Nightly News Media Club, this is Professor Paul Miller, and we'll catch you again next time on the Nightly News Podcast.